Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you watch with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you along for the experience. And Baruch Hashem, my appeals have not fallen on deaf ears. We have gotten some sponsorships, but we need some more. So I don't want to be one of those Jewish grandmothers who, whenever you call, they say, how come you never call? So a special thank you to those people who really came up and sponsored these episodes to make sure that that the show can continue. And, really, we appreciate it. And the rest of you who have been thinking about it, yes, please come and sponsor. You can do it in honor of a loved one. You can do it in memory of a loved one. You could do it in honor or memory of a slightly disliked one. Or you could do it as basically end a vendetta, and say, this person did these terrible things to me, and I would like to sponsor the show as a recognition for the terrible things they've done to me, and Hashem should help them do tshuva. I'll do that too. I'm really easy. And we need corporate sponsors. This is your opportunity. We have a very dedicated audience out there, and I'm sure they would love to hear about your product and be ready to patronize your business, or just patronize you personally by telling you what a great job you do. Okay, so a sponsor for this week is sponsored by the Schenker family from Los Angeles. Good friends, thank you so much. In appreciation for Rabbi Orlofsky and the many years of benefit we have had from the podcast, I am so glad and that people enjoy this. And I keep meeting people. I keep getting emails from people who said they suddenly stumbled on it and they started binge watching 6 years of this. I cannot tell you how much that means to me. I've been getting some really amazing emails lately, and I'll have to read them on the show once, not just to toot my own horn, but just so that people understand that when you help to keep this show going, the chizuk and the appreciation that so many people have and how it really helps people in their lives. That's why we do it. I used to teach. I ran NCSY for 9 years in Long Island. And then I moved here, and then I slowly started teaching, and I had different positions. I used to teach all day. And now, then I started a speaking career. I traveled around speaking. And now I don't do nothing, just this podcast, Someone said to me, are you retired? I said, well, I didn't plan it that way, but it turned out. I'm like Joe Biden. I've been retired. Anyway, so Mitzvah Hashem, we really put a lot into this, and we were so happy that there are people who gain from it. And, shout out to producer Yisrael. Someone sent me an email commenting on how nice the production looks and how wonderful everything sounds. And, really we're doing a top job over here, and that cost money to put it into the subtlest terms. I know it's not something we're supposed to mention, but we need your help and we need your support. And thank you so much to those of you who do. Okay. So we're coming out of Tisha B'Av, and I don't know what that says about Klal Yisrael, that the probably the most popular show I have during the entire year is my Tisha B'Av podcast. Part of that is, I guess, people just are looking for something to do on Tisha B'Av. But I get a lot of comments and a lot of feedback, and people feel it really gives them a chizuk. And I guess maybe I should really change the tone of the podcast and do much more tragedy. Because also when I was talking about, my podcast about the situation and the war that broke out in Israel, also very popular. So people seem to like death and destruction a lot more than they do my usual funny observations. Be that as it may, yeah. When we said the kinnis, there is one of the kinnis by Rabbi Elazar and Kalir, which his kinos are considered by many people to be, the gold standard of kinos. And he has one, Ve'ech enochem. How will we ever find nechama? And it's very unusual that any of the kinos end on a positive note. But this one actually does, and it ends with a positive idea. Teshuvosechem nish'aru ma'al hunini ovdei habal ad yashkif mima'al morid sha'ol v'yo'al va'oz enochem. And then we will have a nechama. So it was interesting. I may have mentioned this. I have a little shul in Har Nof. And anyone who happens to be in Har Nof for a Shabbos and would like to come and daven with us, everything's in English, I'm sorry. So if you're one of the surprising amount of Israelis who watch this, I don't know if you'll enjoy it, although there are two completely Israeli people who really don't understand a word of English who come and daven. And we always have a kiddush afterwards, and they stay for the kiddush. And I say a small drasha at the kiddush, and they sit through it, and they don't understand a word of it. And they say, I love this. I love this davening. I love the place. I don't understand a word you're saying, but it doesn't make a difference. You can get the feeling. So if you happen to be around, you're more than welcome to come and daven with us. And I am the token rabbi. I'm not the only rabbi, but I'm one of the rabbis there. I get to sit up front, mostly because it's in my house. And I get to act as rabbi, make some announcements every now and then with halakhic implications and things, I've never been, this is the only time I've ever been a synagogue rabbi. And it's interesting, I've mostly been in the field of chinuch and kiruv. I've never been a rabbanus. And when my career collapsed some years ago, so some people reached out to me from a shul someplace in Eretz Yisrael and asked if I would apply for the position of rabbanus. And I told them up front, I'm willing to do it, but if you're looking for a world-class posek, that's not what I am. If you're looking for somebody to give shiurim and to work with families and to, and be available for counseling and to, help build communities, those things I'm very good at. But if you're looking for a world-class posek, I'm not. I can paskin basic questions, but anything more involved, I'm not a posek. I remember when I got smicha, I've told this story in the past. I said to my Rebbe, so now I can paskin shailas? Oh, he laughed. He says, no, now you're qualified to maybe ask a shaila. He said, I just wish I could do for you what my Rebbe did for me when I got smicha. He turned it over, wrote down Rav Moshe Feinstein's phone number, and says, if you have any actual questions, call this number, but don't pass it on your own. He says, when I wanted to become a Mara Hira, I went to a particular posek. He said, no problem, sit next to me for a week and answer all my questions, and if you can do that, I'll give you permission to paskin, yeah? So I said, I'm not a world-class posek, and they said, oh, that's exactly what we're looking for. And so I had a meeting, I had an interview, and everybody seemed like they were having a wonderful time. It was going very nicely. And then I didn't hear anything for a month or two. My wife said, why don't you contact them? I said, this is the first time I've ever applied for a job in my life. I never looked for a job. I was either offered or bullied into taking every position I ever had. And it's the first time I actually applied for a job. I'm not going to call them up and beg for the job. They asked me to apply. It was the first resume I ever wrote up in my entire life was for this position. Anyway, about a month, 2 months later, it was, I got a form email. Dear applicant, thank you for applying, but we've decided, not to use you for this position. Thank you, very truly yours. So that was the closest I ever came to becoming a synagogue rabbi. So, a bit of a rub over here, and we answer pretty basic questions. So this past year, Matos Maseh was together. And therefore, we did the Haftorah for Parshas Matos on Parshas Pinchas. And then in Matos Maseh, we did Maseh. And of course, Devarim, we did Devarim. So someone said, my height. And I said, because before Tisha B'Av, there are 3 Haftarahs of Teichacha, of giving warning. And those have to be read before Tisha B'Av. And so when Matos Maseh is together, there's only 1 week with Matos Maseh. So we have to move that Haftarah. So we have 3 weeks of Teichacha. And someone asked, well, when do we do Matos and Maseh, with Matos Maseh? I said, the next time Matos Maseh are separate parshios. Check your calendar for further developments. If you're not sure, I'm sure it'll pop up. And starting with Shabbos Nachamu, 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 Ami. Starting with Shabbos Nachamu, we do the Shiva de Nechemta, the 7 Haftorahs of Nechama. And Kosh Baruch Hu says, I love you. I'm sorry this whole thing happened. Anytime you guys want to do tshuva and come back, I'm waiting for you. And that's what we do. We do 7 weeks of Nechama. And Moshe Shapiro pointed out once that all of Elul are the Haftarahs of Nechemta. It's all of these Nechama. And Rabbi Elazar Kalia asks, how can we have a Nechama? How we have a Nechama after all of the things that have taken place? Particularly this year, when you did the Kriya for Tisha B'Av, and you come across the pasuk in the Tisha B'Av laning, Ata Harei Saladas, Yashem Elokim. Right? Everyone knows Ata Harei Saladas. That's the beginning of Simchas Torah. And here in Eretz Yisrael, that's Shmini Atzeres. And it's to the Eicha Trop. Ata Harei Saladas, Ki Hashem Hu Elokim. Now, the trop of Eicha is musically not that different than the trop from Megillas Esther. And when we do Ata Harei Saladas on Simchas Torah, it's the niggin from Megillas Esther. Ata Harei Saladas, Ki Hashem Elokim v'Hashamayim Ba'al. Right? It's the same one. So here it is Tisha B'Av, and we're remembering the Tisha B'Av that we had on Simchas Torah. Now, again, I say Simchas Torah because in Eretz Yisrael we only have 1 day. Only have 1 day. Shmini Atzeres is also Simchas Torah. This coming year, it will be a 3-day Rosh Hashanah for those of you in Chutz La'aretz, a 3-day Sukkos, and a 3-day Simchas Torah. Right? Because you have Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, then you go into a Shabbos Bereshis. Doesn't give you a lot of time to be Mar B'Sedra. And same thing, you have 2 days Rosh Hashanah, and then you go right into Shabbos. Yeah. And same thing with Sukkot, 2 days Sukkot. We have a day in between, except for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we're all stuck. We all have a 3-day Yontif. I say stuck, but I don't mean to say it that way, of course, because people have corrected me and said, wow, what could be more beautiful than 3 days of Kedusha? And I said, 1 day of Kedusha, a shower, and another day of Kedusha. That could be more beautiful. And in fact, I said 3-day Yontif was something that was instituted by the Chachamim in order to encourage Aliyah, So, and in fact, when I was here, it was this kind of a year. And we went through a 3-day Rosh Hashanah, and we've been debating whether or not we were going to stay in Eretz Yisrael or not. My original plan was coming for 3 years and then go into Rabbonis, see how well that worked out. But to have a 3-day Yontif. So I went through that, and I said, okay, before Sukkot, I said, I'm forced now to make a decision. If I decide to live in Eretz Yisrael, I'm going to be away from family and friends. I'm putting myself into a culture that I don't know and I'm not familiar with. I'm making a decision, obviously, for my children and my grandchildren, most of whom are here in Eretz Israel still. And I have to deal with Israeli taxes, economic issues, social issues, all kinds of things that come up. Or I could have another 2-3 day yontif. And I said, there's no question. If I have to brave terrorist attacks and wars and everything that goes with it, or spend another 3 day yontif, I'll definitely move here. And I decided on the spot to make Aliyah. In fact, there was somebody who was in my house when I finally made the call to Diane Weiss to ask the Shaila. And he says, oh, it was the craziest thing. It was Erev Sukkot, and he's suddenly deciding at the last minute. No, I had decided beforehand. I just wanted to get an official psak to make sure that I was right. It wasn't that I just said, oh, let me call a rabbi and see if I can, be an Israeli. Yeah, I had made the decision beforehand. So people tell stories about me sometimes that bear absolutely no resemblance to the reality. Sometimes I don't mind if I come out looking good. Sometimes people tell me stories. Oh, I remember when you did this or you said that never happened, So when it's negative, I object. When it's positive, I don't really care so much, So someone said, everyone knows that you gave up $1 million contract in Hollywood to, to sit and learn and be Marbitz Torah. I said, that's a great story. I'm not gonna squelch that one. It's not true. The truth is a lot less dramatic. What actually happened is when I was teaching in Los Angeles, one of the parents was a talent agent, and he said to me, "Kid, you have what it takes." I was a kid. He says, I'm putting together a sitcom. I need writers. I want you to write for the show. At the same time, we'll put together a stand-up routine. This was the late 70s, the era of the stand-up comics, And I see you having your own show in 3 or 4 years. And I went home and I thought about it. And I said, let's say I can stay firm and do this, which is very difficult. Stephen Hill was starring in Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible was a television show that they later made into action movies. And the first one, the original cast came to watch and they walked out because they said, you missed the whole chap of Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible, there's no chase scenes. They never use a gun. The whole chap is to go in, do the mission without anyone ever knowing you were there. No one knows their names. No one's ever seen them. They come in, they do their mission, and they leave, and no one even knows that they were there. That's the brilliance of Mission Impossible. And they changed it around. But Stephen Hill had the lead role, and it was a hit TV show. And he became frum, and he realized they would have to film on Shabbos, and he gave it up. And Peter Graves got the role. And so he stayed in Hollywood, but how many roles are there from people, who are going to keep halacha? There's a couple of from people in Hollywood who play fast and loose with certain halachas. Apparently, there was a television show called Gotham, and the kid who played Bruce Wayne as a kid was a from Jew in Los Angeles. They said whenever you see Bruce Wayne eating anything on screen, it's kosher, But he had to do certain other things that were problematic. And there were certain other actors and actresses who were supposedly from, but almost impossible if you want to keep Torah properly. And that's why most of his scenes were like when he was in Law and Order and he played the district attorney, where he basically sits in a chair, and when they present the information, it goes, I don't have enough to go to a grand jury. You're going to have to get the wife to talk. Dung, dung, dung. That's basically all he does. So, it's not the same thing. I said, but let's say somehow I could have this show and keep frum and get them to do, what I want. Yeah. And let's say I am successful, because everyone tells themselves they're going to be successful. Yeah. There was a song in the 1960s, Do You Know the Way to San Jose? And it's about these people who come, to Los Angeles seeking, jobs and entertainment, and all the stars that never were are parking cars and pumping gas, I think. So decided I'm going to go back to San Jose. So I said, okay, but assuming I could really make it, and assuming that I can stay for him, I said at the end, the Kodesh Baruch Hu was going to say to me, I gave you these koiches, and what'd you do with them? You went after fame and fortune? So I said, no, I'm going to stay for him. That's what I told the guy. Nothing ever came of it. I don't even know which TV show he wanted me to write for. I don't know anything about it. And this story has morphed into I turned down $1 million contract. So, hey, if that works for you, don't allow me to disabuse you, But so stories tend to get exaggerated. Roy Sinclair, who actually had a career in entertainment for real, used to say, how is it that you're considered that you gave up more than I did? I was in television shows. I was in Broadway plays. I was in the music recording business, and it was this, Orlofsky gave him $1 million contract. I said, you just have to have the right publicist, baby. I guess they never taught you that in Hollywood. But, the fact is that, I didn't decide at the last minute to keep it, 3-day yontif. But you move along and you have to make certain decisions. And suddenly you're here on Tisha B'Av, and you're looking at the laning, and you see the pasuk. That's the beginning of Simchas Torah, and Simchas Torah was Tisha B'Av. I saw somebody say, I don't know who came up with the chap. And somebody said if the B'ditcheva was still alive in our day, he would have said, if Simchas Torah turned into Tisha B'Av, then our Tisha B'Av will hopefully turn into a Simchas Torah. But how can we have a nechama? That's what Rabbi Orlofsky and Kaliya. How are we going to have a nechama? How do we find nechama? How do we find comfort? Very hard. I had a trip to America recently. It wasn't a speaking tour per se. It was my grandchildren wanted to become Americans. Me and my wife are Americans, so even though our children were born in Israel, those that were born in Israel, they're all Americans because we're Americans, so they're Americans. But they were not born in America. They were born in Israel. So even though they're Americans, they don't have the schus to pass that down to their children. They have to go to America to register their children as Americans. So one of my daughters wanted to do that and make her kids Americans. And she got an appointment down in Florida, and she asked if I would come along. And I didn't have any speaking, make a whole trip to America and schlep around, and we'll go down to Florida and go back up to New York, etc., So, we're, me and my daughter and her 2 kids, we're not like in big demand, as you can imagine. So the first Shabbos I spent by my brother, and it was, he says, okay, but it's going to be a little difficult because my wife's visiting her mother in Milwaukee and is coming back just before Shabbos. And then afterwards we're, going down to Florida. They were selling a condo they had over there. And in order to, move in Mirza Hashem to Eretz Yisrael and have an apartment there. So they had to go down right after Shabbos and go and pack up everything. So, okay. Nonetheless, Baruch Hashem, family is family, and we were able to come. So the next Shabbos, I decided to spend by my good friend, Rabbi Binyamin Hammer. I call him Barry Hammer. And I was supposed to come in for his 60th birthday. He has a home in a little vacation village outside of Monticello. I wasn't able to make it because I had an operation on my hand, and the doctor wouldn't let me fly, and I missed it, unfortunately. But I said, you know what? I'll look at this sort of as tashlumim. I know of my wife, but we'll come up. And my other daughter, who lives in Far Rockaway, came up with her husband and son, and we all came and spent the Shabbos. Birchwood Estates. And Rabbi Landa from Yeshiva Or Chaim basically it's his vacation village. He brings up the whole yeshiva, and they have a whole thing over there. We came up. We had such an unbelievable Shabbos. As soon as I got up there, it was just, the place is so beautiful. We had, it was so relaxing. Everything was so wonderful. And it was really very special. It was very special. Spent it, some of his children were there, and we just had a great time. Motzi Shabbos, they made a little fire. My grandchildren were roasting marshmallows, It was very special. So he says, listen, Dov, he was my assistant director in NCSY. Dov says, they want you to give a shir to the ladies. I said, Gemara says, whatever your balabas wants, you do. If you want me to do it, I'm happy to do it. Okay, they want you to give a shir. I said. Then he says, Rabbi Landa asked if you'd speak to the yeshiva. I said, sure, no problem. Speaking is the only thing I know how to do, Sometimes I go to a simcha and people say to me, I'm a little embarrassed. Can I ask you to speak? I said, if there's a plumber and he doesn't know how to unclog a toilet, he should really find another way of earning a living. All I can do is talk. So I'm always happy to talk. In fact, somebody says to me, goes, I watch your podcast, So I said, well, I talk all the time. It's just for 1 hour a week, we actually film it. But otherwise, I'm always talking. I'm sitting by myself in a room, just talking. Nobody's listening, but, I should really record it, When I lived in L.A., A.B. Rottenberg was there. And sometimes I'd have the schus invite me over for dinner. While the Rebbetzin was setting everything up, he'd sit down at the piano. He'd just start playing. I didn't recognize any of the songs. And I once asked the Rebbetzin, I said, what's he playing? And she says, his day. He could just sit down and turn his day into music. After a while, he realized, maybe I should record these things. And he would sit with a little, tape recorder, and he was ma'ayin and mizgabe. He would just have music pouring out of him. And many of those became some of the favorite songs of Klal Yisrael to this day. So, so I talk, we had just a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. Came back to Israel, and the week afterwards, he called me to say, Rabbi Landa said, he added so much to the Shabbos, and it was so nice. Next time you come, we should do something in a bunch of other vacation villages. We'll set something up. We'll get everything going, And he said to me, we really should make more of an effort to stay in touch. Now, you have to understand that our relationship goes back 42 years. Because when I was first married, which was 42 years ago, I came to Israel, and we had arranged an apartment, and someone gave it away. And, we stayed in a hotel for the first days of Sukkot, and then Chol Moed. We weren't sure what we were going to do. We came to look for apartments, and we came to eat in the Chavetz Chaim Sukkah, and Barry saw us there and saw us as a couple of just nebuchs who needed help, and we became his project. He found us, somebody had gone away. He gave us their apartment in the meantime, this and that, and he just took care of us that whole year. He made the kiddush for my first daughter, who was born in Eretz Yisrael, and that was it. We were friends for years. And then at one point, he came to work with me in NCSY, my assistant director, and he was just this ball of energy. I mean, I had trouble keeping up with him, And back then, that was when my ADD was at its height and I was all over the place, But he was, and he would always say to me, Dov, I'm a machine. Dov, I'm a machine. He would do 100 different things at the same time, which is unbelievable. Anyway, so we spoke. Maybe it was Tuesday. And then Thursday, I get a call from the Rebbitzin. And Barry was nifter. So how could that possibly be? I was just with him. I just talked to him on the phone. He was full of life. He was full of energy. That's how his father passed away, a sudden heart attack. His uncle, his grandfather. And that was it. He went to sleep and didn't wake up. The Shikas Hashem. And I still don't have the words to express it. There's a hole in my soul. He was more than a friend. He was a brother. And he was very close to, my younger brother. He was also a brother. So we're mamish. He's a brother to me and to my brother. And he was part of the family. He was just unbelievable. He could talk to anybody. He could solve any problem. He was not afraid to jump into anything. It was absolutely amazing. How can we find nechama? That was the question. So I watched the Levaya online. I mean, there was no way I could get in. I don't know if you know this, but there's they keep talking about having a war here, another war, besides the war that we're already fighting from the north. So right away, all the airlines stopped flying, only El Al. It was impossible to get a flight, and it's a terrible situation. It was very hard to get in. I watched Levaya. It was like 2 hours later. And one of the people who spoke was Zev Ginsburg. He was a Rav, of course, in the Five Towns, was also very close to Barry. And he told the story. He says, when I lost my daughter and I was sitting Shiva, so everybody was coming, pay Shiva call. And someone comes in and he says, Barry Hammer is sitting outside in his car. He says, tell him to come in. He says, he can't come in because he says he cannot handle seeing the look of pain in your face. He says, that's a nechama. That's a nechama. When you have that level of understanding and appreciation, how can we have a nechama? So the only way that we can have a nechama is by understanding that life is very complicated. It's interesting that the last words he ever said to me was, Dov, we have to make an effort to stay more in touch. I told my wife, well, there's only one way I'm going to be able to do that now. She says, don't go and see him right away. But you never know. Never know what life has in store for you, You can plan whatever you want, when your time comes. During the Intifada and when there were all the stabbings and everything that was going on, I went to the old city. I didn't care. When they had the missile attacks, in the early time of the war, and they were sending all the missiles in Gaza, everybody would go running. I didn't go running. So one time someone said to me, aren't you worried? I said, Orlofskys don't die in missile attacks. We don't die in plane crashes. We don't die in pandemics. None of us have ever died in a dramatic way. Diabetes and heart disease. That's how we've died for centuries. That's how I'm going to go. And then Barry dies of a heart attack. So it's like, uh-oh, that's my kryptonite. You know what I mean? One thing to do. And in fact, about 6 months ago, well, for the past year, I've been having trouble breathing. I had a bypass operation 10 years ago after my heart attack. But the past year, I've been having trouble breathing and pressure in my chest. I figured they were panic attacks because I'm already half crazy. So, why not? I'm having panic attacks. And my wife kept saying, no, I don't think so. Go to the doctor. And the doctor told me go to the cardiologist. And the cardiologist says, this doesn't sound like panic attacks. And he sent me for a bunch of tests. And he says, you have, a clogged artery. So I go in to have stents put in. It was when I went to have my bypass, they weren't going to do stents. It was too serious, I remember afterwards, everyone would come to see me. They say, yeah, I had blockage. I had stents. I said, why am I the only one who had a bypass? Well, I must have a better insurance plan than you guys do. but, so they're going to put in stents. All right. So the guy says it'll be about an hour and a half. 4 hours later, I come out, tells my family, this was very, very serious. It was very hard, complicated thing, but we straightened it out. A few weeks later, I'm walking and I'm having trouble breathing. Now, when I went for the follow-up meeting with the fellow who did the stents, he said to me, I'm sure I'll see you again, which is not what you want to hear from a person who puts in stents or a moil. That's not what you want to hear. So I went back to the cardiologist, and he says it would appear that the stents didn't take. They closed, or things grew around, whatever it is. So what do I do? He goes, well, it doesn't pay to put in any more stents because the ones that we put in aren't working. They're not going to open you up again. So don't start any long books. So, Barry, I don't know. I might see you sooner than you think. If only there was a terrorist attack, I'd be fine. But heart disease, gosh. Anyway, but who knows? My solace is what the Chafetz Chaim said. He said that gesund has nothing to do with arichas yamim. You can live a long, sick life. Yeah. So my mom did. She made it to 89. She had heart failure for like 25 years. She had terrible diabetes. She had all kinds of different things wrong with her. She made it to 89 in terrible health. People asked me, how's your mom doing? I said, maintaining her usual level of low standard of living. Terrible health. So, who knows? Maybe I'll just linger for the next 25 years. But when you look for a nechama, find a nechama. How do you find that? How do you manage to go on and come out of Tisha B'Av? And you think about everything that happened on Shmini Atzeres and how they destroyed everything. So the answer is that life is complicated. Somebody told me once they were going to a levaya, somebody who died very young. It was a terrible tragedy. And they're saying, Tfilas Haderech, and we should get there b'simcha b'shalom. He says, b'simcha? Get there b'simcha. He says, because you're happy that you didn't get killed on the way. Even though you're going to a levaya, but at least you're happy that you made it, right? That something else didn't happen. Because that does happen. Those kind of things happen too. Terrible. And I was teaching in Or Sameach, so there was a fellow there who lived in a yishuv, and they just had a terrorist attack. And he said to me, there's somebody from the shir getting married tonight. How do I go from the levaya of friends and go to a wedding of a chaver? How do you do that? I said, listen, this is what synagogue rabbis have to do all the time. They go from a levaya they go from a bris to a levaya to a chasana. Life is complex. There's a lot of different things. The halacha is if your father dies, you make a bracha that you lost your father. And if he left you an inheritance, you make a bracha thanking Kadosh Baruch Hu that you got a Yerusha. Why? Because two things can be true at the same time. And you have to be able to hold a lot of emotions in your head and in your heart. And that's why, people are talking already. How are you supposed to have Simchas Torah this year after what happened last year? The answer is if we allow tragedy to define us, we won't have any days left. There've been attacks on everything. In the concentration camps, they used to take 10 Jews and hang them on Purim in remembrance of the 10 sons of Haman. That's why a lot of people were expecting that the war from Iran and Lebanon, the Hezbollah, were going to start on Tisha B'Av, because they look for days that are meaningful to us to attack us. Yom Kippur, Shmini Atzeres. Didn't happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen, but they want to take our days of simcha and turn them into tragedy, and we have to be able to deal with two things at the same time. To be happy and to have the same. I remember when my father died and when my mother died, the Shabbos of Avelis. It's Shabbos. There's no Avelis on Shabbos, but you know that there's a tragedy. And you have to be able to keep both of those thoughts in your head at the same time. And it's not easy to do. As I often say, if living a meaningful life was easy, everybody would do it. So it takes 3 haftarahs to give us teichacha. It takes 7 haftarahs to be able to give us nechama. And to tell us, listen, you lost the Beis Hamikdash, you lost Eretz Yisrael, you're in Gullus, all the tragedies that you've gone through, but you can be strong, you can rebuild, you can be comforted. Nachamu, nachamu, ami. You find nechama. You can lose a parent, you can lose a good friend, brother, and you have to find nechama. You have to find the strength to be able to pick yourself up and keep going, because otherwise you could just sit down and die and just give up. Klal Yisrael's recent history is replete with stories of people who came out of the Holocaust with nothing, with having lost a wife and children, having lost everything. And somehow they picked themselves up and they rebuilt their lives and rebuilt Klal Yisrael in the process. So, the Klausenberger Rebbe is a classic example where he lost his wife and all his children and he came back with nothing. Nothing. They were sitting Shiva. This girl comes and brings a pair of socks and puts it down. And family says, "What's this?" Says, "I was in the DP camp after the war." And the Rebbe was there. And he says, "BT, my daughter, Bas Yisrael, you're not wearing socks." She says, "Socks? I don't have a piece of bread to eat. When am I going to get socks?" The Rebbe sat down and took off his socks and gave them to me, that I should wear socks. And I've kept them with me all these years. He had nothing. A pair of socks. In the DP camps, Mike Tress was in the airport in Europe, and he sees a Yid. And he says, can I maybe borrow your tefillin? So he says, sure. So he opens up his overcoat, and he's just wearing an undershirt. So the fellow said to him, it's not the way you daven. An undershirt. He says, what can I do? He said, I went to the DP camps, and I saw people there who didn't have shirts. I gave them my shirts. I gave away my talis and tefillin. That's why I don't have a talis and tefillin. I gave away all my clothes. I just saved the overcoat because it was so cold. I was afraid. So I gave away my shoes. He looks down. He says he was wearing slippers. He says, I gave away whatever I had. So there are people who, were in this terrible situation, and they survived. He lost his wife and all his children and his Hasidim and everything, and he started over again. And he built Netanya and Kiryat Sanz and Laniado Hospital and many other things. But there are so many yeshivas and mikvos and shuls that were started by people who came to America with nothing. Because you have no choice. You got to pick yourself up and you have to keep going. And we have to live. We live with the pain, and the pain is etched on us. And it's in our souls. We live with it every single day. But you have to have a nechama. There comes a point where you have to stand up and say, okay, I have no choice. I sat shiva for both my parents, and there's always that, and a brother. And there's always that moment at the end of shiva where they tell you, get up. And people don't want to get up. My father died. I was still in my 30s. The suit that I taught Kriya on, I couldn't get rid of it for years and years and years and years. I kept it. I couldn't let go. And to be able to have a nechama in order to be able to move on. There's always going to be a hole in your heart, a hole in your soul. But you have to find a nechama. You have to go on. You have to keep building. And that's this time. These are the weeks, 7 weeks of nechama, where we have to somehow find comfort to be able to go on. Find comfort in your family. Find comfort in your friends. Find comfort in your community. If you don't have a community that gives you comfort, then find another community. The people have to be there for each other. People have to care for each other, be concerned. My father died. I was, I think, 38. And it was very rough for me. I was too young to lose my father. And so Rabbi Findel, who was the founder and dean of the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County, where he convinced my father to send us. And we went out Shomer Shabbos. And my whole family is from today. And there were over 100 great-grandchildren to my parents who are all being brought up in Torah and mitzvahs because, of Rabbi Findel. And when my father was nifter, he called me every Erev Shabbos just to tell me I'm thinking of you, that you're not alone. So you have to find the nechama wherever you can find it. We have to be strong. And so whether it's a personal tragedy, like a good friend who went to sleep and just didn't wake up, whether it's a communal tragedy where Eretz Yisrael is invaded and hundreds and hundreds of people are slaughtered and raped and burnt and killed in the most horrific ways and kidnapped and taken away. Whether it's people up north who have to leave their homes and missile attacks are coming down and blowing up people. You got to find a nechama. Got to find the strength to keep going. And that's what each and every one of us has to do in our lives. Everybody has trauma. And we have to take that trauma and say to ourselves, we're going to pick ourselves up and keep going. And when you think you can't, you think, how will I ever sing again? How will I ever dance? How will I go from the funerals of my friends to my friend's wedding the next night? How do you go from one to the next? Eifendel told me that this fellow, a Hank family, he says the husband died. And they left behind teenagers and younger children. And as the months went by, so the kids began talking. They would laugh. They would, begin to live life. And their mother was very angry at them. How could you ever laugh again after you lost your father? The Gemara says after the Churban, people didn't want to eat meat because of the korbanos. So Bishua says, what about wine? We brought that also. He says, okay, you're right. We won't drink wine. He said, well, what about bread? They brought the menachos. Okay, we won't eat bread. He says, well, what about bikurim? Don't eat fruit. Just going to eat vegetables? So finally they said, what are we going to do? And he says, you have to remember the Beis HaMikdash. Al Rosh Simchasi. At every chasana, you have to remember it. At everything. I was just at a chasana, and there's that dramatic moment where the Rav puts the ashes on the chasan's head. And you break the glass. My nephew just had his vart, and they break a plate. The Tanoim. Remember Yerushalayim. We always have to remember it. It always has to be a part of our lives. When I had my heart attack and my bypass, a couple of doctors there said you shouldn't have made it. So when things go wrong now, I said to my wife, I said, listen, I'm still alive. When people ask me, how you doing? I always say, Baruch Hashem, I woke up this morning. I'm living on overtime. I should have died 10 years ago. 2 of the major doctors there said you should not have survived. So every day is a gift. Every day I wake up. And I would tell my wife, I said, look, at least, if nothing else, at least you don't have to at every simcha say, I'm sure Abba's here, looking down from Shemayim. I'm sure he would have liked to have been here. I'm right here. Isn't that the most depressing part? I'm going to stay. And I remember when they were taking out my gallbladder. I was in America. I had this terrible gallbladder attack for like 8 hours. It was just terrible. And Hatzalah brings me to the hospital, and there was a from gastro there, and they bring in a surgeon. They said, we have to take out your gallbladder. And I said, I can't. I'm in the middle of a speaking tour. I have to go speak. So the non-Jewish surgeon looked at him like, this guy out of his mind? But he knew who I was. He says, look, I can just give you something, and you can go about. But if you have an attack, you're just going to lie on the floor in an airport for like 8 hours and not be able to move. I said, all right, we'll do it fast and I'll continue the trip. He says, yeah, no problem. And he turns to my brother and says, he's not going anywhere. But when they went to get my gallbladder, so they, the nurse comes in and says, do you want to sign a DNR? Do not resuscitate. They're trained to get you to do this because they want to take your organs. There's a fascinating book, if you can get your hands on it, called The Undead. It was written by a medical journalist who says he's an atheist, but he does a history of brain death. And he says no one ever used brain death as a basis to determine whether or not somebody was dead. He says they came up with it because they had to figure a way to get your heart out of your body when you're not dead. So they say, yeah, he's dead. they take your heart because we said you're dead, even though it's always been whether your heart is beating and whether you're breathing. Those are the only standards ever been. And there are instances of locked-in syndrome, which mimic brain death, which really aren't, and all kinds of other. He brings a tremendous amount of evidence. It's absolutely fascinating. So he has a chapter there talking about how medical staff work very hard to convince you to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate, so that they can take your organs. So the nurse says, "You want to sign a do not resuscitate?" And I said, "No." So she was surprised because usually, they have their talking points. He goes, "Well, some of the things we do might be very invasive." I said, "Be as invasive as you can. I'm not going." He says, "Well, you might end up just like living as a vegetable." I said, "My goal is to live to become a burden to my children." She didn't know what to say. But I was prepared for the question, So I'm sure I'll stick around, and to the point when, I finally do go, they'll go, "All right, it was time." It was one of the great tragedies when you reach a certain point. And, people ask me, they say, "How do you explain the death of a young person?" I said, "That means you're okay with the death of an old person." I said, "Being an old person, I'm not so happy with that." I said, "I know people much older than me who feel even stronger about it than I do, But you have to find the chama. You have to find the strength to go on. So, Mirza Hashem, in these weeks, now is the time we have to find a nechama. We have to find a nechama for our personal tragedies, for Klal Yisrael's tragedies, for the Beis HaMikdash, for the matziv that we're in. And in Mirza Hashem, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, we will have an emesa nechama. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sponsor an episode, and we need more sponsors. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor a Parshan 5. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. You can leave a comment, ask a question, listen to other shiurim, read other articles, listen to the theme song over and over and over and over again. You can download it and make it the ringtone on your phone. People do this, which is pretty amazing. Shout out to Lenny Solomon, the great. Yeah. And that's it. Until next time, I am Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode. And we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.